human being. I would not accept myself as a foreigner. I'm not a foreigner. This is my home.
Or was it the policy, the political atmosphere, a toxic, racist undercurrent driven? Tonight, we have gathered those directly affected, some terribly so. We put them together with politicians, leading thinkers, and cultural commentators. What does it say about us, this Britain?
First, they will become irrelevant, and at worst, they will risk going out of business. For some time now, myself and others have championed the urgent need for adequate inclusivity of BME in our region, and we are proud of the progress we have made so far in our respective capacity. However, the task ahead is enormous, and hence, the need for all BME groups to come together to fashion out path by creating enough awareness and participating in a community development activities so that we can use these realities to reshape and redirect the political discourse in our region and by extension at the UK at large. Community development services. My mission is to promote peaceful and inclusive society for sustainable development, to provide access to justice for all, and build effective and accountable and inclusive discussion at all levels, to reduce inequality within and among countries, to tackle social exclusion issues, to reduce rates of offending and empower vulnerable women, such as female inmates and ex-offenders. Why are we here tonight? Do we really need consultation? Yes, because we need to work with the leadership, and at any point, if dialogue necessary, this is the time we need to sort it out. The structure, one way to do it, before I proceed, credits of the artwork to Joe Shakespeare. Thank you for the work. The structure to do it, and the one way to do it, is for us to come together. Because I believe if you want to work fast, you work alone. But if you want to work far, you work together. This is the time we need a collective effort. On that note, I would like to welcome Elena Morgan, the senior curator of MIMA, because the reason why we are here tonight, we know how much it costs to hire a venue for events like this, and the cost of MIMA management, they give us at no cost. On this note, we need to know more about what MIMA is doing, how BME community could embrace and also work along with MIMA to achieve their goals. Elena?
Thank you, Ola. I've been told I've got about 40 seconds. So, firstly, just a warm welcome to MIMA. For any of you who haven't been before, I hope you will come back and experience some of the programmes we have through the week. And to old friends, hello again and welcome. It's really lovely to have you all here, and we're really delighted to host this event and other events like this, so do think of us in the future. But I guess I just wanted to give a very brief introduction to what we do. So Middlesbrough Institute of Modern Art, or MIMA, is more than a gallery or museum. It's a civic space with a social function. And our aim really is to respond to the context we work and live within, and to work with people making workshops, gardening, dementia-friendly session, discussions and talks, things in the galleries, and at the centre of that day is a free communal meal at 10 p.m. So I hope to see many of you there. It's a really important moment for the town where people from all backgrounds come together to share. We also have exhibitions, Middlesbrough collection displays, projects here and also off-site around the town, where we work to raise a range of underrepresented issues and voices with different partners and with constituents and people from the area. And that's really about responding to the issues, the ideas and the brilliant things around us in this place. So That's just a very brief introduction, and I hope you'll talk to me more if you want to find out more. Do come along on a Thursday, do check out our website to find out what's going on. It's a really vibrant and lively and lived-in museum, so I hope you'll come and be part of that. Thank you.
Thank you for the brief introduction. Now, we are getting to the real discussion now. But before then, I would like to say a very big thank you to someone here tonight, because when you have a dream or you intend to contribute to the community, there must be somebody that needs to encourage. For that particular impact to come in place, it is people that support, it is people that motivate and give you that encouragement that yes, you can do it. Because when I initiated this, I sent an email, and the first person that will say yes, I will come. Even when we are here to fix the date, when we are here to finalize the venue, she's so much ready to contribute and to also be part of it. That will lead us to the first speaker for tonight. And it's no other person, Caroline Hare. Caroline is the Inclusion and Community Engagement Manager for Crown Prosecution Service North East, and she's also sitting on the AIDS Opportunity Panel and approaches. She'll be talking on those approaches now, right?
Thank you. Today is the 6th of February, which is quite a momentous day for a number of reasons. One reason is it is International Day for Zero Tolerance of Female Genital Mutilation, which is hugely important. And I think when we start talking about how statutory services engage with BME communities, let us not forget women in BME communities, and also LGBT people and disabled people in BME communities. So I just throw that out, because I think sometimes statutory service providers think in silos, and we need to make sure we don't forget people. The other thing about today, and if you've seen the news at all today, you can't fail to have noticed that it was 100 years ago today that some women got the vote for the first time in this country. And we've heard a lot about that on the news. So 100 years after some women got the vote, when we look at Parliament, we still see underrepresentation of women in Parliament, and in all positions of power. We see a gender pay gap, and women are still experiencing domestic abuse and sexual violence. So getting the vote, good thing, hasn't actually solved everything. There have been sex discrimination acts dating back to the 1960s. And this is still the position we're in now. There have also been race relations acts dating back to the 1960s. And again, if we look at Parliament, if we look at positions of power, we see underrepresentation of black and minority ethnic communities in Parliament, in the judiciary, and, as I say, in all positions of power. So the legislation of itself is not enough and is never going to be. In 1993, which was 25 years ago, if I've got my maths right, a young man called Stephen Lawrence was stabbed to death in London in a racist attack. That event became a watershed for a number of changes in the way this country looked at racism and racist hate crime. In 1998, an act called the Crime and Disorder Act created what are called racially aggravated offences. So you can have a criminal offence of assault, there is an additional criminal offence of racially aggravated assault, and that is a racist hate crime. And what the Act did was say those crimes are more serious, so a racially aggravated assault is more serious than what we tend to call in the criminal justice system basic assault. So some of those crimes can go to the Crown Court, whereas the basic offences can only be dealt with in the Magistrates' Court. And if we can prove that an offence was racially aggravated, there is a higher sentence that goes with it. So the criminal justice system from 1998 has had this concept of hate crime. The other thing that followed from the Stephen Lawrence murder was the Macpherson inquiry and the report which came up with the phrase institutional racism, and talked about canteen culture, talked about unconscious bias. When Macpherson talked about institutional racism, he was talking about the unconscious or unconscious racism, racism based on ignorance, rather than the overt kind of hate crime that we've talked about. So all of those things followed on from the murder of Stephen Lawrence, and that was, as I say, nearly 25 years ago. Where are we now? We still have racist hate crime. We still don't always recognise and understand crimes as racist hate crimes when they are. We still have underrepresentation in positions of power. We still have an imbalance of power in society between white people and people from black and minority ethnic communities. I think things have changed in that I think we are now in a place where, generally speaking, apart from within some groups, generally speaking, overt racism is frowned upon in society. It's kind of not the done thing. But if you think of discrimination as an iceberg, the overt stuff is the tip of the iceberg, the stuff that you see. 2/3 of the iceberg is underwater, and is the stuff that you don't see. And that is that mass that needs to be addressed, and that statutory services need to get hold of and need to address. And if you're white, you don't necessarily understand that 2/3 of the iceberg is there, because you don't necessarily come across it very often. And that's why it's hugely important that statutory service providers are having dialogue with people from the black and minority ethnic communities, because we don't necessarily understand your experiences of racism. We need to understand better, and we can only understand that by having dialogue with you and by listening. And listening is hugely important. I think there is still a long way to go, but I think criminal justice agencies are starting to understand that we need to listen, and we need to listen hard. Within the CPS, we have set up what we call hate crime scrutiny panels. It was an initiative that started in West Yorkshire about 10 years ago, I think, where the CPS in West Yorkshire realised they weren't dealing with racist hate crime terribly well. So they decided one way to try to address that was to invite members of black and minority ethnic communities to come and have a look at some of their hate crime files and tell them what they thought they were doing well and what they thought could be done better. And it was hugely successful in West Yorkshire, so it was rolled out across the country. In the CPS North East, we have a racist and religious hate crime scrutiny panel, which is chaired by Ranjana Bell, who's sat over there, and is made up of members of the community across the North East. And what they do is they look through a selection of our hate crime files to tell us what we could do better. And the selection is made by Ranjana, not by us. So that we lay ourselves open, as it were, to scrutiny. And that's an important way in which we're trying to engage with communities and learn to do things better. We also have a thing called a community involvement panel, which doesn't look at cases in the same way. It's a panel that we go to and consult on our business priorities, which doesn't sound very exciting, I know. But we also consult on our equality and diversity strategy and our community engagement strategy. And I have to say that we need more members on that panel. And I've got this opportunity to stand in front of you and give it a plug, so I will, shamelessly. We definitely need more representation from black and minority ethnic communities for that panel. And as I say, it's not looking specifically at racist hate crime or any other hate crime, but it's looking strategically at how we run our business. And we also need more people on that panel from the Cleveland area. So, given the opportunity to stand here, how could I not mention it? So yes, our panels are an example of some of the ways in which we're seeking to have dialogue with communities. We've consulted nationally with communities on our hate crime policies quite recently. Police have their independent advisory groups and are seeking to engage with communities in that way. And there are various other consultation processes and ways in which criminal justice agencies are seeking to engage with communities. I think we all recognise we've got a lot more to do, but hopefully we've started the dialogue in a way that's positive, and today seems to me to be an opportunity for us together to explore other ways in which we can hear voices and make sure we're acting on them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you so much for this. And if there's any question, I think when we are in the prior session, you could also raise that one now. I think it is necessary for me to bring to our notice that the MP for Middlesbrough, he sent his apology. He's in Westminster, if not, he should have been here today. So I think that's necessary to let us know. Also now, we will go to the keynote speaker. That is the main reason why we are here tonight. That will lead to Richard Holliman, who is going to be talking on the factors favoring the minority inclusion in decision making. Richard has been in Middlesbrough for around 10 years and is working within economic development, culture and communities, and now regeneration. Still covering the culture and community portfolio until the new director came in place a few months ago. Currently, Richard is leading on social regeneration at Middlesbrough Council, right?
I didn't realise I was the keynote speaker, so if I disappoint, I do apologise. Get my presentation. The subject I was going to try and cover today is inclusion in decision making, and I've taken quite a broad definition of inclusion. Obviously, you can address any specific points you want to raise in terms of questions. So I was going to cover briefly a little bit about kind of where my views come from, a little bit about how I feel that the council is viewed from outside, and I think that puts a bit of context on some of the things that I'll cover. Some of the common mistakes that I've certainly seen throughout my career, I've probably made all of them, but there's certainly things that I see relatively regularly, and I'm sure some of you all will have done as well. I'm going to make a few suggestions as to what I believe the solutions to that are, and just use a live example at the end about social regeneration to make sure that I can kind of give some perspective with an opportunity for us to do something about some of the common mistakes I've raised. Can everybody hear me okay? So firstly, I'm here as a council officer. Obviously worked for Middlesbrough Council, but the views that I'm going to express are my own. And I'm flagging up that that's a disclaimer because I want to come back to that point in the presentation. I'm currently Director of Regeneration, so all the kind of the physical regeneration of the town that you'll see going on is something that I work on. But I'm still covering the Director's role for Culture and Communities, which obviously has a lot of the community-based activity within it. And I'm currently leading on the social regeneration agenda, which is the council's work towards balancing up the physical regeneration of the town with the social regeneration. That's my background. So firstly, this is my view on how I believe the council are perceived from outside of the four walls of the civic centre. Firstly, we quite often get things said to us about the council believes this or the council does this. And it's really just to get across that the council itself is not a living, breathing thing. It's one of those things where, probably shouldn't use this as an example, but people say, oh, the council have got an agenda against me, or the council have got an agenda against people like me. To be honest, I wish we were that organised. We haven't. The council itself is not, it's a collection of people doing a vast variety of very different jobs. Council policy, we have policies for just about everything, and a lot of them do cover inclusion. So council policy itself is not set up to exclude people. And a lot of the things that happen where people do feel excluded is not because of the policy necessarily, it's because of the individuals. We have a corporate value which is about I engage and consult with others, I seek feedback from others, I understand the needs of others. And that I think is really important. It's one of our 5 council values, and it's something that I certainly would subscribe to, and I think most people would. But what we have ultimately is not one living, breathing thing. It's over 1,000 individuals making individual decisions, and that's where it kind of goes back to the disclaimer that every individual that is making a decision to apply policy, or to interpret policy, or to do something, is making their own individual decisions within that framework. And getting all of that right all of the time is obviously what we're striving to do. But outside of the council, there is a perception that there is a big machine, that the council is one entity and is a very big and complex machine. And as I say, I wish that we could act as joined up as that every time. Not always the case. So in terms of how the council acts, as I say, that some common mistakes, and I've seen them all, I've probably done them all over the years, and I'm sure you'll recognise some of these. The first one is whenever we're doing something, there will always be occasions when people haven't thought about inclusion issues at all. So they've just gone ahead and done whatever they needed to do, applied whatever policy they needed to do, or carried out whatever actions they needed to do, and have just not thought about inclusion at all. There's also occasions when people do think about those scenarios and things that they have to do, and the solutions they come up with are largely based on tokenism. And it's about making sure that I've spoken to a representative from a particular community, and that's that community box ticked. Possibly more common than that, I would suggest, is where people do think about inclusion issues. They think, oh, I want to try and avoid tokenism, so they end up not doing anything. They end up just saying, oh, well, I don't want to do that because that's tokenistic. I'll just throw it open to everybody. And that's not necessarily looking at all of the issues about equality of access. Probably the most common focus on inclusion that we have is when people look at our workforce diversity. And we do monitor this sort of stuff, and we do try to be proactive about this sort of stuff. But it's probably quite commonly seen that if we got that right, then that's that problem solved. And I don't believe that it is. We also think about that from our council member point of view, and again, the more diversity we have there, the closer we are to solving that problem. And again, I would just pose that that on its own is not going to solve the issue. So in terms of what the potential solutions are, and as I say, I've taken a very, very broad definition of inclusion, I've taken a very broad scope of issues here. But generally, to all of this being resolved so that people feel more included, is for all of us to get closer to our communities. So for all of the council services, for all of the council staff, for the council leadership, council members, the closer we get to our communities, the better that feeling of inclusion is naturally going to be. But equally, it's also about knowing who our communities are. I think we've got quite a lot of knowledge about certain communities within the town because they've been here for longer. We've had more projects that have engaged in those kind of communities, and there's a bit more of an understanding about the kind of the needs and the routes into those communities. But the ones where we really struggle are the ones where we know there's a community out there, but we don't really know who it is, or where they are, or how quickly it's growing, or what issues they have. And I think that's yet another one of those issues that leads people to think, oh, well, I don't want to do something tokenistic, so I won't do anything at all. We've also got to make sure that we ensure that the opportunities that we have for inclusion and engagement and influence particularly are real. Because I think if any community from any background can't see a perception of influence, then that's going to be a real turn-off for them. And it's one of those situations where, again, we can have really tokenistic engagement, we can have really tokenistic inclusion. It's ultimately about influence and what are we doing with what is coming forward. And where I said earlier that the workforce and member representation isn't an answer on its own, it's actually a very symbolic part of the solution, because I think if any community can see that it is represented through the workforce and it's represented through the councillor representation, that at least gives the suggestion that the organisation will be listening. So it's one of those things that it's very symbolic, and it's something that we clearly need to keep an eye on, doing as much as we can around. And I just want to try and put some of those thoughts into a real live example at the moment, and something that we're doing about social regeneration. Now, social regeneration we've defined as ensuring that everybody in the town can play their own part in the town's future. And it's one of those things where the physical regeneration of the town is well underway, but the question quite rightly gets asked, yeah, but what about the people of the town? You could say that everything that the council does that isn't about building something is social regeneration in a way, but that's not really what we mean by it. What we mean is making sure that all the people in the town feel included, feel listened to, feel valued, and feel as though their part in Middlesbrough's future is valued. It's a major focus for the Mayor, and for me it's about how we drive public service reform. It's not about doing one or two actions now, a couple of projects, and then we'll move on to something else. It's about how do we shape public services in the future so that they are fully inclusive, looking at all of the community within Middlesbrough, and looking at how a community can be regenerated. So we're doing some work at the moment, which will be starting in the next month or so, and we see this as an ongoing process. There will be a start to this, which will, as I say, will be over the next few months, but it's something that we're going to keep trying to embed across everything that we do. To do that, we need to get out and talk to people, but it's very, very important to us that this isn't a consultation on what we think. It isn't something that we're going to be putting out to everybody to say, what do you think about this? It's not going to be a questionnaire to fill in. It's not going to be anything like that. It's going to be based on conversations. So we've got 5 core questions that are conversation starters. And it's things like, what's life like in Middlesbrough for you? And what's life like in Middlesbrough for the people around you? Interview about what life is like in Middlesbrough. But the critical thing for me when we talk about inclusion is that next point. The whole thing is based on the council taking away its assumption that we know best, or that actually that we know anything. So it's going to be based on collecting the evidence, collecting everybody's views, collecting all of those conversations, and trying to look through that to understand what the community really feels, or what different communities in Middlesbrough really feel, and then doing something about it. As I say, it's not a consultation. We're avoiding anything like statistically valid surveys, so that we aren't going to be standing up and saying that 73% of people under the age of 30 in Grove Hill think X. Because in some ways, I think that makes some of our approaches to inclusion worse, because we then assume that that group only has one view. So what we're trying to do is gather as many views as possible about life in Middlesbrough, the challenges, the good things, the bad things, the things that need to be addressed. And then we're going to decide what on earth do we do with that? We haven't set out, well, we're going to go and do these conversations, and then we're going to do this, this and this. We're assuming that we don't know what people are going to say, so we're going to do the conversations, engage with as many people as possible, in as many ways as possible, and then have a look at, well, what does that tell us? And what does it tell us that we need to do with public services in Middlesbrough? That will then define what we do around public service reform. Now, in the past, and looking back on some of the things that I've flagged up as kind of our common mistakes, we'd have decided what we were going to do with public service reform already. We'd put it on a bit of paper, we'd send it out to everybody, and we'd collect some responses in and say, yep, everybody's on board with what we're doing. Or we'd have gone a bit further and had focus groups, we'd have done different community events, but it would largely have been around, this is what we think. What we're trying to do with social regeneration is collect as much of that back in from the community as we can without doing any publicity. We're not going to put anything in the Gazette. We'll get views largely based on how people perceive the council. So what we're trying to do is identify as many organisations, groups and individuals that want to act as a host, and it's a host for a conversation. So say for example, you have a multi-sector organisation that's active in a particular area or a particular community. It's about us providing the resources to that host to be able to hold as many conversations as they can, collate as much feedback as they can, and feed that into the process. But we're not just doing this as a one-off exercise. We want to build that community of hosts for the longer term so that we can get a lot of that feedback in, have a look at what it tells us, try and come up with some proposals around how we might take forward public service reform, and then put that back through the hosts to start further conversations about whether that's appropriate, whether what we've come up with is something that people are broadly wanting to engage with. Now we'll be monitoring the coverage of hosts because what we want is to be inclusive. Now we're acutely aware of the fact that we're working through MVDA. Tracy's here tonight. Now MVDA have got a very large database of community organisations, but it's not every community organisation. So we'll be working through MVDA to get to as many as we can, but any suggestions anybody has about other ones, or individuals who want to go and host conversations because they feel they want their community's views to be included in this.
Sorry, can you explain to people? I know what it stands for, I think most people MDVA.
Sorry.
MVDA.
Middlesbrough Voluntary Development Agency. They're the kind of leadership organisation in the town for the community and voluntary sector. So a lot of groups are kind of registered through MVDA. So essentially what we're saying at this stage is there's a whole load of views, viewpoints, perspectives that people have in Middlesbrough, and we want to try and understand and hear as many of those as possible. The best way that we can find of doing that is to work through a network of hosts and not do it as a council thing. The more of that we can get back in, the better we can inform the public service reform agenda, which should determine what the council and its partners look like in the coming years. We'd obviously ask anybody in this room who feels they would like to host conversations, would like to feed back in the views of their community or of their friends, anybody, the more we can get the better. But we want it to be ongoing. This isn't a kind of collect it in, do something with it, present it to everybody and move on. It's about us doing this as a continual process so that over time the policy making, the decisions and everything else that the council does gets closer and closer and closer to the communities that it serves, and more people get the opportunity to have influence over it. Because at the moment we could carry on doing things the way we've always done it and making some of those common mistakes, and that might suit some people might feel included, but we don't get the sense, we don't get the feedback that that's necessarily working. So the social regeneration example is one way of us saying we want to do this differently. The way we're approaching it is saying we want to do it differently, but we're almost not going to determine how we're going to do it till we've listened to people. So the whole process is about engaging, listening, and then trying to do something with that feedback so that we get the longer term processes of engagement right. And that's the example. If anybody wants to catch me afterwards or wants to propose that they would like to host conversations, we'll sort all of that out.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the details. I'm very sure Richard will be highly welcome to join the panel when it is time. So if there's any question, you could please pen it down. Very sure it's ready to answer us. That will take us to the next speaker, which is Marshall Garrett. Marshall Garrett studied colonialism and representation of race in the media, and she has an MA from Durham, where she focused on the relationship between statutory services and ethnic minority community. She has written several articles on race and racism and give lectures on the same subject. She currently manages a charity for young people in Middlesbrough, All the Youth. She's the project officer. And has a weekly radio show, so really covering a variety of topics. She has been a youth and community worker in the Northeast for quite a number of years.
Thank you. Good evening. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a talker and a loud one. And yes, this is, and I mailed Ola earlier and asked if I could increase my time to 15 minutes, and he said no. So, so I'll take that. I've got 20 slides and 10 minutes, so that works out roughly 2 minutes per slide. Ain't gonna happen. So please just give me a little ground, Marsha, and I'm gonna speed it up. The presentation that I'm doing today is kind of from a different angle, because I feel that if we're going to be talking about race and racism, if we really want things to change, we have to be really honest in our discussions, not sugarcoat it, not try and pretty it up to make it easier to swallow. And that's what I do. So I focus today on criminal justice and race, but in my wider work, I look at all aspects of race and society. So this is what impacts trust. The first slide, this is actually a clip. This film is going to be coming out this year. It's called 1500 and Counting, and it's referring to the number of people who have died in police custody since 1991. And of that number, 500 were from ethnic minority backgrounds.
Be scared of the police.
Yeah.
Looking at what's happened.
Yeah.
You think we should go, why do you think we should be scared of the police?
Because, I mean, they don't see us as human. And this is being programmed into their I think that's part of their actual mandate. To black people are not the same, you know. So when you've got a group of people that are not looking at you as the same, it makes it easier for them to treat you a certain way.
This is very true.
You know. So there's a lot of concern. We should be very scared. And if race relations don't get better, and when I say get better, because you know, police are taught to treat each other, i.e. the police, as family. Like they are to look after themselves. I mean, when you're looking at that sort of programming, that sort of training, yeah, us as black people, we don't stand a chance within that society. So, I mean, the whole structure needs reform, in my opinion, and we need a lot more black people.
Well, this is a good question.
Okay, I think that was a really powerful clip, and what he's saying there's a couple of points that I've based this entire presentation on. And I've titled this slide, How Did We Get Here? One of the things that I do in the work that I do with young people is I talk about institutional racism in education. It's something that a lot of people don't want to address. We'd rather it wasn't there. I personally would rather it wasn't there, but it's a fact. In the studies that I've done, In education, white is presented as naturally superior and non-white as naturally inferior and dangerous, and that's a really key point, dangerous. This is a quote from Carter G. Woodson's book, Education of the Negro. The same educational process which inspires and stimulates the oppressor, and I put in brackets there, white population, with the thought that he's everything and has accomplished everything worthwhile, depresses and crushes the spark in the Negro by making him feel that his race does not amount to much and never will measure up to the standards of other people's. And whilst when I was at school, I can tell you now that one thing that I learned is that people that look like me were originally savages, then slaves, and then a societal problem. People might not like to hear that, it's a truth, it's something that massively impacted on me. Black and brown skin was and is presented as naturally inferior to white skin. Mainstream media and education play a massive part in our understanding of race, and I'm going to deconstruct that a little bit more. We live in a racialised society where your skin colour matters, your life chances. Racism starts with colonialism, again something that is not massively covered in our schools, which led to the creation of racial groups and a global racial hierarchy which prioritises white skin. Colonialism, impact of that, it destroyed the histories and cultural practices of the colonised countries. So we're talking the entire African continent. It's going to add to mistrust. This information gets shared. It doesn't just stay in one place. His sister, Janet Alden, I've done quite a bit of research on her, states she was subjected to police intimidation, similar to the Lawrence family, when she refused to accept the judge's ruling and continued fighting. The family were also given the wrong body to bury, and this was only revealed 10 years later. In December of 2004, 4 of the 5 police officers were granted early retirement and received lump sum compensation payments of between $44,000 and $66,000, as well as pensions. We're not seeing much justice, and this is what's added to the issues.
Sorry, Marsha, did you know that the family had a civil action against the police, which was held in Middlesbrough, and the local press was told they were not allowed to cover it? This was in Middlesbrough, that case, and we were not informed that that was even going on at the time. There was a civil action taken against the police, and it was totally secret in Middlesbrough.
There's a few cases of that where things are kept behind closed doors. Why can't we have access to this information if we really want to address race and racism, particularly when it comes to policing? I think this is a really important point that everyone should be aware of, is the impact of social media, because it's grown so much. We have more access to social media, which means now, and I'm sure that we've all seen this, that we can see acts of police brutality towards people of colour quickly. So the death of Eric Garner went viral. The growth of black social media, which it does have that title, black social media, and I'm involved in a few different groups on social media, and non-white-led justice organisations, means these incidents are being shared from a different perspective. We're not just getting them from mainstream media, which is predominantly presenting one view. The Voice is an excellent newspaper, and importantly, the outcome is monitored and shared, so we can see if justice is happening, if the lives of black and brown people are treated as worthy as the lives of white people. Next case, No Justice, Sean Reid, 2008. He died in Brixton Police Station, aged 40. He'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia. This case was a particular one for me because I had a brother who was diagnosed with schizophrenia and had numerous incidents with police where I believe he was treated with less than, and I'll give you more of an example of that if I have time. The verdict in 2017, no officer will face charges. This is the second time that case has come up. Despite an officer admitting he lied to the ME, which is the medical examiner, and prevented Sean being checked, he stated he was faking it. So he stopped the medical examiner from checking Sean whilst they were in custody. That contributed to his death, yet that officer won't face any charges. Why? Same officer also lied during the inquiry. He then said, I didn't say that. And then, yeah, I did say that, so he lied. Sean was restrained face down by officers for 4 minutes. Officers denied this length of time, but they were filmed doing it. So it was proven that it was 4 minutes they held him down. He had abrasions and bruising, which the officers again denied doing. So where did they come from? He was left unattended in rear stack position, which is a very uncomfortable position where your arms are behind your knees, in a police van for 10 minutes, unattended, before being carried into the custody suite, semi-naked again. We still, why? Unconscious and dumped on the floor. He had urinated on himself, and he was only moved when he was in the way. So he was left on the floor of the custody suite to die like a dog, is how I would see it. He died from a cardiac arrest linked to asphyxia. No officers charged despite evidence, and a jury verdict of unnecessary restraint. His family have had to raise thousands of pounds to bring his case, and they still haven't got justice. Then we go to mistrust to report racism. Why are people not reporting racism to police? This is the case of Bijan Ibrahimi, 44, murdered in 2013 by his neighbour. He was beaten to death and set on fire. He had called police 85 times over 4 years to report racist abuse. 40 of Bijan's calls to police were not even recorded. So again, is racism taken seriously? We need to see it, not just have it written on a piece of paper. The IPCC, which is the Independent Police Complaints Commission, that name has now changed, suggested the officers involved in responding to Bijan display signs of racism. They saw him as the problem, not the racist perpetrators. And again, that's something that we've seen before. 4 police officers were sacked. Of these 4, 2 received sentences of 10 and 4 months. He was beaten to death and set on fire, and it was ignored. His calls for help were ignored. Current contributions to lack of trust. I've presented a historical picture, now we need to see what's going on at the moment. Last year, 2017, 4 black men died following arrests in the UK. There have been protests and a lack of mainstream media coverage, in my opinion, about the actions of the police. Focus was on the victims, promoting them as perpetrators, which we saw with Stephen Lawrence. There's a desire, if a black or brown person has died in custody, by mainstream media to present them as the problem, like they caused it, they are responsible for their death. And that is an example of institutional racism. The IPCC, set up in 2004, was predominantly former police officers. I think that setup has changed now. Has not convicted 1 police officer since it's been set up. Olasene Lewis, who died in 2010 after being restrained by police officers, his inquiry, similar to what your point, sir, was held in private by IPCC, and people were saying, why? Why can't we see what happened? Why can't we get the outcome? There's also extreme delays in the investigations by the IPCC. Now it's the IOPC, Independent Office for Police Conduct. And particularly following the shooting of Mark Duggan in 2011, one of the criticisms were that the IPCC originally worked with police to come out with a statement. So rather than investigating police for what had happened with Mark Duggan, they worked with police to put out a statement to the public, which misled journalists into believing Mr. Duggan fired officers first. That story went right around before we actually got the truth. It impacts on trust. I am nearly done. Promise, promise, promise. I'll skip this one. I just think it's really important that media representations of black and brown men add to mistrust and reinforce the view they don't see us as human. 4 out of 5 British people believe that the media's portrayal of ethnic minorities promotes racism, and I absolutely agree with that, and I studied race and media. Got 2 more slides, I promise, very quickly. This is so important though. 2017, these are the 4 young men who died last year. This is the statement that was put out by the IPCC for all of them, that they became unwell or ill in police presence. That's getting a chilling feeling for me. Edson DaCosta died at age 25. That's this gentleman here. His mother died 2 months after his death, and people said that she died of a broken heart. Shane Bryant, which is this gentleman over here, age 29, died in July, held on a pavement. He died in Leicester. Darren Cumberbatch, which is this gentleman here, age 32, unexplained burn marks over his body, tasered and pepper sprayed. The IPCC was not informed until 10 days after he died by police, which goes against protocol. And then we have Rayshawn Charles, who was aged 20, caught on CCTV being choked by a police officer, and he died in July. In the above cases, the families have still not been told actual cause of death. No officers have been suspended, and investigations are ongoing. Mainstream media incidentally blamed all of these victims for their deaths. Very quickly, race disparity audit showed we have disproportionate numbers of people of colour in prison in the UK. Black and brown people get longer prison sentences. This is fact. This is not airy-fairy stuff I'm presenting, it's fact. They get longer prison sentences than their white counterparts for similar crimes. They're more likely to be stopped, searched and arrested. And the Met report in 2017, so just last year, showed more force and restraint methods against black and brown people. The Death in Police Custody report last year shows a disproportionate number of black people die in police custody. This all adds to mistrust. I apologise for the graphic nature of this picture. Progress. This is after those 2, the race disparity audit and the Death in Police Custody report, this happened. This is Terrell Jones-Burton, 15 years old. He was suspected of a mugging, which has now come out that it wasn't him. It was a case of mistaken identity. A police officer charged at him, and I've seen this on CCTV, pushed him off a bike, smashing his face into a window. He's lost teeth, broken jaw, seizures, abdominal pain and bleeding on the brain. And I've spoken to his mother, and she again is fighting to find out exactly why that police officer treated him as such. And this is very important. When acts of police brutality happen, we have a number of racist, very racist sites that jump on that and glorify it. And then again, it adds to the mistrust. I was fortunate that I went onto this site, Stormfront, which is a recognised white power, very racist site. I was able to get a screenshot before they shut me out. And then I sent this everywhere, and then they got bombarded. Yes, that is what I wanted. Just some of the comments in response to this. People saying 15 years old, who's done his birth certificate, if it's not white, it's not right. His mentality will be that of a child, and he won't live till the age of 60. So when you combine that with the treatment, it's going to add to mistrust. Last, I'm not gonna do that one. Finally, today is Bob Marley's birthday, if people didn't know that. And one of the things that I think is really important is there was an attempt made in the 1980s, but it didn't happen, by John Fernandez, who said that it should be anti-racism training to get people to understand why they hold certain views around race. Why is it that they use more force against black and brown men? Is it because we have all been educated to see black and brown men as more dangerous and needing to be controlled? It's to break down and deconstruct Eurocentric education. And just because it's Bob Marley's birthday, props to Bob, always. Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, everywhere is warm. Thank you very much for your time.
Today, we will add a deep, and I'm very sure Ajana is here tonight to also support that argument or to counter the argument. At the same time, Caroline is still on the seat. She's from the Crown Prosecution Service, while Ajana is sitting on the Custody Department and also working with IAG for Northumbria. This will really lead us to the real parallel discussion, and looking at our time now, I'm very sure we still have something to achieve through that. So I would like to call on the people that's going to be on the panel list. From my list here, we've got Habas Tihairu, is from the Refugee Forum, Northeast, and Lokadia Shedeka, she's from Women Network, yeah, and Bini Araria, she's a community worker, and we've got Professor Astrid Waldin, she's the Associate Dean from Tisa University, Research and Innovation. Rajana Pev. Have you called Rajana? Yeah. These are the people that is going to involve in this discussion for tonight, and we've got the moderator. The moderator is no other person than Dr. Shogowawa. Dr. Shogowawa is a registered medical practitioner with international experience in and higher specialist qualification in public health from UK, Ireland, USA, East and West Africa.